Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foil Fox. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I'm on the Papertrey Ink and Ink to Paper YouTube channel, and I'm sharing a brand new stamp set called Vintage Lantern. And you can see it has this wonderful lantern that it'll stamp and cut out. It'll stamp the background as well as some detail. It also has some flowers that you can use and leaves. But I'm going to actually use some holly on this one, but you'll see that in a minute. It has this matching die set that cuts out all those goodies. And then here is the corner it holly. And I'm using the holly in this. I love holly this time of year, so I can't resist it. And I'm going to be using the leaves and the holly for this one. And here is the matching die set to help me cut all of those out. And then I'm also going to be using a new border bling frame. This one is called Believe because it also cuts out the word believe, but it has this very charming border that I'm going to be using. And then a perennial favorite is the Nifty Plaid, and I'll be using that as well. So to get started, I'm going to start with 2 pieces of cardstock and a white cardstock, and I'm going to glue them together. These are A2 size, and I'm going to just lightly glue them and then stack them precisely on top of one another. Then I'm going to take the die after that dries, by the way, and I'm going to take that border bling die and I'm going to emboss it. I'm not going to cut it all the way through, but the reason why I sandwiched 2 pieces together is so that I could get a really deep impression. So I did use my little rubber mat for the embossing on my die cutting machine, but I also added more pressure with additional sheets of paper. And that's what gives you that really deep impression. And then without cutting it out, by the way, that's a great thing. And so now I'm using a piece of soft stone cardstock from Papertrey Ink. You know that all of their color ink cubes coordinate with their cardstock. And I'm inking it up with weather vane, and I'm just using the detail stamp. This is the layering stamp. I'm using the soft stone as the background instead of stamping the background. And then I'm also stamping 2 of these little L shapes. You can see I already stamped one of them, but it was a little crooked, so I got to stamp 2 more. And now I'm going to cut them out using the matching die sets. And you can see it even includes the little window that we're going to cut out, that rectangle, and then we're going to cut out these L shapes. And with those cut out, I just love how detailed the die is, so it really cuts out this really nice shape. And then now I can't resist, I can never resist shading. You can skip this step, but I'm using a C4 Copic marker, and I'm just doing some very light shading. But like I mentioned, it also has that stamp, the background stamp where you can stamp a color, and then a detail stamp and you stamp a coordinating color on top. But I use the soft stone cardstock to use that as my background, and then I'm shading it with the C4. Just a tiny bit of it. You can skip this step as well because it works out perfectly without even using the Copic marker. And then now I'm going to take these little L shapes, and we're going to build this little leaded glass window to our lantern. And I'm just going to take a little bead of liquid glue, and at the end of each of these little pieces, and I have it turned upside down because it's much easier to put on and to position, because I want to know that I'm just barely catching the edges of these little L shapes, and that helps me get it in the right position to create this little leaded glass window. Again, the detail on this is great. I just love it. And now that once I have that on there, I'm going to set that aside so that it can dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to take the corneret holly, and I'm just going to be cutting out a bunch of holly and its berries, and there are some leaves with it as well. And then I'm also going to be cutting out the candle that does come with the vintage lantern die set. So with those cut out, I'm going to use just the veining stamp that goes with these holly, and I'm stamping it with Pinefeather. I'm just doing the veining part of it. And I had cut these all out of white cardstock, and I'm using pale peony to stamp the berries, which is a fairly pale color, and you'll see why. You can use the reds, which works out, but you know me, I can't resist doing some color blending. And I'm also going to stamp this candle. I'm just going to stamp the body of the candle with the pale peony again. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to shade it with some Copic markers. I wanted kind of an ombre look, but also the flame. There is a little stamp for the flame, but I decided to just use some Copic markers for that, and I'm using Y38 and YR04 for the center of the flame. And then I'm going to color this candle, and I'm going to do the Copic markers. I stamped it with the pale peony, but I'm going right over the top with the R20, then R22, and then R24 to give it a darker bottom to it. And it does give it a nice detail and an ombre look to the candle. And I'm just going to do the same thing to these berries. I'm using the same colors as I used Copic markers. I'm just shading these a little bit, just giving them a little bit of the darkness, and then some different colors using the exact same Copic markers. Now that the berries are all done, I'm going to go on back to my leaves. I'm going to take Pinefeather again, and I'm taking a little tiny blending brush, and if you'll see that I don't go directly from the ink cube to the holly. I first blend it onto my surface there because I don't want it to kind of grab onto the paper. I want it to go on rather softly, and then I can build the color from there to whatever intensity I want. You can also see that I am not coloring the entire holly. I want to just have shading down at the bottom and then go a little bit lighter and it fading off to the white of the paper. Just wanted to give this really soft, gentle look to this card. You can of course use any kind of intensity of colors that you happen to like. I thought I would try this one out with a little bit softer colors. And now I'm going to take ripe avocado for these little leaves, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm blending it first on my surface and then onto my leaf, not directly onto it. Again, I don't want it to really grab and get too heavy when I'm not ready to have it be that way. So I am just building the color by going from the ink pad to my surface and then onto the leaf. This really helps you control how much color you put on and how intense it goes on in the very beginning. Now I'm taking a rectangle. This rectangle fits exactly on the inside of that little dotted rectangle to that panel that we embossed. And I'm taking Nifty Plaid, and I'm taking the lazy way out. I'm not even going to take it off. It's acrylic sheet. I'm just going to ink it right up with pale peony. And I'm going to just take that little piece of cardstock and kind of line it up on there, and making sure, I'm getting an idea. I want it to look like it's pretty centered, but these little diamond shapes really help me with that. And I'm just going to place it right on top very carefully and then kind of smooth it down gently, but just enough to get contact. And now I have made this nice pattern paper. Next is I'm going to take this candle, and there was a little stamp that makes that little wick, but I decided to just use a marker to mark that in, taking a tiny little bead of liquid glue and then sticking on the flame. I'm going to need some tweezers for this because this is a tiny little piece. And then I'm going to let that dry while I go on to building this card. So I'm going to take that little piece that we just stamped, put a little bit of liquid glue, and I'm going to center it right in the center of that. We don't want to lose that little pierced edge. I just love the detail of that border. And now I'm going to stamp the sentiment. There is Warm Wishes as one of the sentiments that's included in Vintage Lantern. I'm going to just get my panel all straight there, and then I'm going to use some Pinefeather, and I'm going to stamp up this sentiment. I'm just slightly kiss the paper. I inked it up really nicely, so I know that I have lots of ink on there. I don't need to press hard. I don't want to uh, kind of distort the word, so I just kind of kiss the paper with that. And now with a aqua mist card panel that's a little bit bigger than this top one, I'm going to mount that together. So I'm just showing a little bit of the aqua mist, just a little bit of a border. It gives it a little interest there, and another kind of will tie in all the colors. And now I'm putting on a little bit more of the double stick tape. You see that didn't work out too well, but I added more tape. Fortunately, you won't see it because it tore it on the backside. Hooray! And then I'm mounting it onto a larger white card base. And now I had put on some foam tape on these lantern, and I'm just going to peel off that one little bottom part and position the candle in there, put the release paper back on so it won't stick, so I can get an idea if that looks right. And now at the top of the candle, not on the flame, but on the top of the candle, I'm putting a glue dot. This will help me glue it down. It'll also give a slight bit of dimension, which I want. So I'm going to peel off all of the release tape here, off the whole lantern now. And you see I put foam tape even all the way up at the top of the handle. And then I'm going to just stick this down. Make sure it's centered. And I'm going to center that candle as well. The glue dot allows me a little bit of movement before it sticks down permanently. Now I'm going to do one more thing. I've decided I want kind of a wreath look. So I'm taking 2 circle dies. One's 2" and the other one's 1 3/4 inches. And I'm going to cut out this little ring of white. I used white cardstock. And I'm going to take some glue dots again, and I'm going to put one at the top and one at the bottom. And that's what's going to stick this down. And also, like I say, give a little bit of dimension. It's a little bit less than foam tape, which is exactly what I want. But it just raises it up just slightly from the lantern. And now the best part is coming. After we did all that hard work and did all of our leaves and holly, and we now get to build this all out and add just the finishing touches by arranging the holly and the leaves and berries. I don't know why I love holly so much, but I do. And of course, it's corresponding berries. And I like having these other leaves that are not holly as a different color and just as a contrast, and they help me build out this wreath a little bit. I'm just tucking them in here and there. And I'm going to also add holly up at the top of the lantern so that we have a little bit of decoration up there as well. Little berries, can't forget those. And I'm going to also just tuck in a few of the leaves there as well. You can kind of just use your judgment there. I'm just going to tuck in that one more leaf, and there we have it. And I really like the softness of this design. It is quite delicate, and sometimes I'd like to do that. It would be equally lovely in your darker reds and greens, but this one I just wanted to go a little bit more pastel for a little bit of a difference. I really hope you will try out this design and that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, I hope you'll give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And then here is a list of a few of the items I use: vintage lanterns, corneret, holly, border bling, and then nifty plaid. And then you can pop over to blog.inktopaper.com and see a supply list. But don't forget to go to foilfox.com. We have a complete supply list and all the goodies. You can get all the products there. And it has also some close-ups. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.